G'day and welcome back to another episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups. On this episode, we are going to be stripping the cylinder head out of the Morris Minor 950. G'day and welcome back everyone. To those people who are new to the channel, g'day, how you going? So, on this episode, we are going to be stripping the cylinder head in order for us to send it away to get machined. Now, we need to strip this thing down completely to as minimum as we possibly can. So that means we need to get out the valve springs, we need to get out the collets, we need to remove the valves, we need to remove the bypass hose that goes between the cylinder head and the water pump, and probably just remove the valve stem seals, I guess. So like you've seen in a previous episode, I spoke about this tool, what it is, what it does, and I'm going to show you how to use it. So let's jump straight into it. Alrighty, so what we need to do is remove the valve stems out of the engine itself. So we're going to start at cylinder number 1. Now it's important that when you pull them apart, you keep everything in order. So we're going to keep all the valves, the collets, the springs, and the valve stem seals as well. We're going to label them in each bag, and we're going to note as well which one goes where. Just quickly, this is a cylinder head, as you can probably see. Yes, it does look like it's seen better days. It looks like, you know, there's a fair amount of carbon buildup. Oh, it's even got the old gasket on there, so we'll probably take that off, but we can do that a bit later. Now, inlet and exhaust valves. How do you know which one's which? So the inlet valve is a different size to the exhaust valve. How do we know that? Well, couple of reasons and ways. One is that the exhaust valves will generally have a bit of soot built up around the outside of it. So as you can see here on cylinders or holes 1, 3 and 5. The other two are the inlet. So what that means is the air going into the engine is going to be more cold, more dense than what it is when it's burnt. Hence the reason why there are two different size valves for inlet and exhaust. So inlet's going to be the larger one, exhaust is going to be the smaller one. So what we need to do is when we take them off, we need to write down cylinder 1 inlet, cylinder 1 exhaust. That was obviously around the wrong way, but that's how we're going to be labeling them. So let's grab a bag, a texter, and get to work. Alright, so here's a couple I've prepared earlier. So we have cylinder 1 exhaust and cylinder 1 inlet. It's important to note, like we've been doing with this build, that you label everything and you put everything in boxes. That way you not only know where it all goes, but as well, if you need to take it to the machine shop and they need to look at a specific valve or a specific part, they can go back through, grab it, and they know exactly which one came in what spot. What we need to do here is, I've shown you how to use this on a previous episode, but it wasn't on a car engine, it was on a quad bike, so it's going to be a little bit different. So let's try and get this set up in such a way that I can show you how to do it. Now we want to try and put it, sorry, I'll just bring the head back a little bit. We want to try and grab the tool and we want to set the jaws to the right opening. So this opening here, that's where the valve is going to sit directly up in here, and the collets are going to face on either side. You have this adjustable handle down the bottom, which is going to push and pull when it decides to let go and work, and that's going to compress or release the pressure on the valve. So you can get ones with a longer piece just here, in which will enable it to compress it further, depending how far apart it is, or if you need to adjust it, you can then wind it out. Now, I've wound mine pretty much all the way in, and I've dummy tested this and found that it's not actually going to compress it fully. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run a socket between here and the valve itself. I'm gonna find a small enough socket so that way when it touches the back of the valve, it's not gonna do any damage. Now, chances are we're going to be replacing these valves, so it doesn't matter too much if we destroy them. Alright, so I'm just going to reposition the cylinder head just so that way we get a little bit more room in there. Now, I've just grabbed myself a 16mm socket. We're just going to stick that on the valve, just like that. We're going to grab our tool and we're going to fit it to there. Now, it's important to note as well that when we use the tool, that it sits directly across here and doesn't squash the collets. Now remember, the collets are these little pieces on either side of the valve. What we want to be doing is compressing the spring, removing the collets, and then once we've released the pressure of the spring compression tool, the valve spring will then come off and we can remove everything. Right, so I've already tried to pre-do this, and I haven't had much success because the tool doesn't extend far enough down. So what I'm going to do is just use this socket to go on the back of the valve. That way, hopefully it should give enough compression where it'll compress the spring enough and we can get the collets out of there. So let's see if that'll work. Aha, perfect. So once the spring's been compressed, grab yourself a magnet. We're just going to grab those collets. Oh, that's not gonna work. We can just grab a pair of pliers or even just our fingers. Take them off one by one. Now remember, there are 2 collets, so move those to the side. Now when we release this, it's going to want to go flying out, so we just want to make sure that we do it nice and easy, just so that way we don't send anything into the abyss. Terrific. Just try and remove the tool. There we go. Now let's have a look here. So at the top we have the retainer and the spring. So inside there is where the collets sit. That's your valve there. And that's your valve stem seal. Oh, that's definitely seen better days. Really good way to know if these are worn, or 2 good ways, I guess. One is the feel of it. So that, to me, doesn't feel too bad, but being a rubber component, being soaked in oil all the time, it's probably not the best thing for it, and it's going to deteriorate. Now, the second way to tell if these are worn, it blows smoke on startup, or when you take off from a set of lights or an intersection, chances are these suckers are worn. So they're really easy to change. But the fact that we're replacing the valves, we're not really going to be worrying about reusing these. So let's just all bag it up, stick it in a box, do the rest of them, and then get this cylinder head sent off. All right, so I just loosened that valve and I've pulled it out. Now, it is worthwhile noting the amount of carbon built up on the end of the valve. So you can see it all around there. And you also see a bit of a shiny spot around the outside where my thumbnail is, just there. That means that the valve's been sealing, which is really good. But the downside of this is there's a fair amount of carbon built up on there. And there's been a bit of heat go through here as well. You can see the discoloration. Now the heat could be simply because the car hasn't been converted to unleaded, or it could just be running too hot because the vehicle's been overheated. It may have had the wrong spark plug in it. Could have been bad fuel. Could have been a number of things, ignition timing. So the fact that we've pulled the valve out and we've sussed out the internals is a really good sign to know that moving forward, we're only going to make this engine better than what it currently is. And also remember that spark plugs don't only just tell a story of the internal components of the vehicle, but also doing these sort of jobs gives you an idea as to how the internals are actually working. Now, here is Tomo's interesting fact number 1. When a valve moves, it doesn't just move in a vertical or a horizontal, or it actually works on a bit of an angle. So as the rocker arm comes down, it's not pushing it directly down, it's actually pushing it on a bit of an angle. So it's actually causing it to slightly move like this. Instead of moving up and down, opening, it's actually causing it to wear on a bit of an angle. So you'll see on one side of the valve, just here for instance, that's probably where it's been sitting like this. As a rocker arm comes down, the force is pushing it that way, which means the valve is slightly moving this way, which then in turn wears the opposite side down here. So it is interesting to know, because the reason why they change the valves and the valve guides is because the guides wear. That it may be in the middle, might be perfectly sealing, but at the top and at the bottom, chances are it's probably not. Next thing I need to do is just remove the studs. So it's worthwhile noting, like I've mentioned on many previous episodes, the 2 outer ones are longer than the 2 inner ones. So what I'm going to do is take all these off and put it in with a rocker gear. I'm also going to remove the thermostat housing studs. This one here looks like it has seen better days. It's actually quite shallow just here. I'll just grab the camera and I'll show you. Not shallow, but it's quite thin at the top just here. So what I'm going to do is put 2 nuts on there, crack it, and then try and remove it. They should come out okay. Worst case scenario, I get a set of multi-rips, take it off. You take those off, and then we will also go and grab the exhaust studs all the way down the back as well. Once all that's off, then have the fun, and I really hate removing these things because they just few and far between, removing this. Now it looks like someone's brazed it at some stage. Hopefully you guys can see. So you can see it's on a bit of an angle. I'm going to try and just remove that. But I'm going to run the bypass hose. I do believe in using the bypass hose between the water pump and the cylinder head, just for added heating and cooling benefits. So let's try and remove that and see how far we get with it. All right, so some of them have a nut on there. You can actually just put a socket on there and then it will come undone. I'm just going to use a trusty set of mouldy rips. I don't think it's even going to budge. No, it's not. Oh man, looks like that's been in there for donkey's years. That's going to be super duper mega fun. I might actually leave that up to the cylinder head guy to be able to remove. Sometimes you get lucky and they come out, sometimes they snap off, sometimes you got to drill them. Yeah, I'm just not even going to attempt that any further. I'm just going to go ahead and remove all the studs out of all these. I'm going to get new ones because there's no point in reusing the old ones. So they should come out hopefully fairly easily with minimum to no effort. I'm just going to attempt to do it with a pair of mouldy rips just to see if it will actually come out as easy as I hope that it will. No, so it's not even going to budge. Just try again, go a bit tighter. Oh yeah, sweet. Just going to go ahead and work all these out. Once they're all out, I'll then take the cylinder head along with the block to Colin at Sprite Parts. Once he then has it, we are going to then send it away and get done. As you can see, there's a halo of ring of light behind me, should I say. Oh, because I am the son of Christ, having the name Christopher. Yes, by the way, my name is actually Christopher. A lot of people think my name is actually Tomo, Tom, Tommy, whatever, yeah. So my surname and the abbreviation is Tomo, so hence the nickname Tomo. But look, guys, as I said, I'm gonna send all this away. We're gonna get it machined, serviced, converted to unleaded if it hasn't already been converted to unleaded. Essentially what they do is they put a different valve seat in there so it actually runs cooler, therefore we don't need to run the lead additive in the fuel. Colin's going to lend me a donor engine and gearbox, then we're going to mount it inside the car, so just behind me here. Once it's mounted inside the car, we're then going to modify the tunnel. Hopefully we don't have to mod anything down around there in regards to the firewall, because you know that's not really what we want. Once everything's mounted and we have done the cross member, everything's all lined up perfect, Mickey Mouse, we should be okay to put it in. But then we also need an exhaust system. We've got a new intake system, so we're going to be running twin SUs on it, which is really cool. Yeah, plumb the exhaust. I'm going to run different fuel lines. I would just want to try and hide that electric fuel pump a bit more, that way it's kind of out of the way. We then need to shorten the tail shaft, we need to pull the diff out, we need to send that away and get rebuilt as well. We also need to look into the suspension. The upper control arms apparently has a shock built into it, so it'd be really interesting to pull those apart, have a bit of a feel and see. So that'd be really cool to be able to jump onto. All this wiring down here, you can't really see it too bad because it's in a decent sort of state at the moment, but I just want to clean all this up. There's just like exposed wires there. Yeah, that like red terminal, that looks a bit dodgy. See if there's anything there I can clean up in that firewall. Maybe even just replace the fuse holder with something a bit modern. All that tape that's all over there, I want to try and run some conduit around there, down around the sides, really clean up these terminals, maybe try and replace them with something a bit more modern. And all down around here. So this side's obviously not too bad. We have a transistor, I think it is, a resistor for the cooling system. So we're probably gonna have to get rid of that because we are going to run a coolant temp gauge. So the customer doesn't know it yet, but I'm gonna run a coolant gauge, coolant temperature gauge, should I say, But then in saying that, we do also need a thermo switch as well, so I might rig that up somehow. I'll probably need to run a different radiator, I believe. So yeah, anyone's got any tips or hints on that, that'd be really appreciated. I'll try and start putting it over my socials as well, with things that I'm doing. But yeah, there's so much to do on this car. But once we get the donor engine in and we mount everything up and we know where everything's going to go, we're pretty much on the right track to success. So it's going to be really fun. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this build. In case you guys haven't realised, there's probably a heap of extra little bits and pieces. We still have to look into the wiper motor, so that will be another episode that we'll do. Have a look as to why that's not moving, and just try and modernise this thing a bit. It's got some LED globes at the front for indicators and stuff, so I might try and change a couple of the other globes over to LEDs just to make it a bit more modern. I think the customer would appreciate that. But anyway, guys, that's how you remove the valve springs, valves, collets, and valve stem seals out of a cylinder head. This job is pretty simple to do. You can do it yourself. Ideally, you know, try and send it to a professional if you're unsure how to do it. But as I said, also that tool that I had, the valve spring compression tool, it's not something that you generally would have available to you unless you do this sort of stuff all the time. So, you know, in those sort of instances, it's sometimes best to just send it to a professional, get them to do everything. But the more you can do to your engine to try and get hands-on experience, you know, the better it's going to be, the better mechanic you're going to be, whether you are an apprentice, whether you just do stuff at home, whether you're a fully qualified mechanic. Doing this sort of stuff, you don't really see it all that much, or not all the time anyway, but I do, obviously, because this is what I do in my garage at home. Guys, if you enjoyed the channel, please consider liking and subscribing. I am always looking for extra content, so if anyone out there who lives in the New South Wales or Sydney region, even if you live interstate and you want me to do some work to your car, I would love to have the opportunity to. There's a lot of stuff coming up for the rest of the year, and I can't wait to share the rest of it with you. Guys, until next time, we'll see you right here on another episode of Tomo's Tune-Ups. All right, let's go crack a beer, see what we got inside.